I was getting such severe cognitive issues that I wasn't able to drive. And at some point, I was walking down the street and my husband texted me a photo of a burrito in the silverware drawer. I mean, with like 3 question marks. That is the kind of stuff I was doing.
My name is Michael Rubino. I'm on a personal mission to make sure you don't get sick inside your own home.
I knew there was something wrong. I'm just so relieved there's something that you can do about it.
Dana, you're an accomplished musician, songwriter, singer, and an accomplished author. And I want to thank you so much for being on this podcast today, Never Been Sicker. And it's incredible what you've accomplished in such a short amount of time. You literally get into the industry. You start at the top of the mountain, which obviously I'm sure there was a lot of hard work to get to the top, but you're at the top of the mountain and then life happens. And I've had the opportunity of getting to know you quite a bit, and your remarkable story and journey that takes you to this place. But can you share a little bit about what it was like getting to that top of the mountain and then, the unfortunate climb down that ensued?
Yes. First of all, thank you for having me. And I'm your biggest fan besides your mom. Like, that's for sure. We've already established that, but I just want to say I'm so happy to be here and talking to you today. And honestly, it was when I first started watching your podcasts and your videos on Instagram and learning from you. This goes back several years. One of my goals was to meet you. I know that's sounds like Hollywood talk, but it really was. So here we are. And so I get to check another cool thing off my bucket list, because truly this was one of them. So thank you for having me. Truly, truly happy to be here. Yes, so I started singing and writing songs when I was really, really little. And I was completely on a mission to be a full-time artist. And I knew that was what I was going to do. Nobody could sway me, no matter what they said. So I went to college for music, and a couple of years later, I was selling gym memberships, I was nannying, I was doing all kinds of things to just be able to live in New York and get by in New York City. And I said, I can't do this anymore. I have to make this a sustainable life for myself. And I was determined within the next year to get a publishing deal, which is really the bread and butter for most songwriters. And especially at that time, the business was really so driven by songwriting and songs and radio play and airplay. Now, in the advent of streaming, the economics have changed, but that was still a time when it was really, really important. So I got my first publishing deal, and it was with a company called Famous Music, which was Paramount. And it was incredibly exciting and amazing. And after they were bought a few years later by Sony, I ended up so I had written a couple of songs so I was without a deal for a little while because there was this transition period. And in order to make my catalog for a new publisher, right, because they're not going to own anything that just folded into my deal at Paramount, I have to create something new and exciting and give them a pipeline that they can bank on, and then that they can go and use within the industry to say, we have this hot new writer, she has this coming out or this coming out, and we want to get them with all your artists and stuff like that. So that's sort of how it works. So I wrote with my husband 2 songs. I had watched this documentary about Celine Dion and about her struggle to have kids and to get pregnant. She went through a lot of rounds of IVF, and it was a very, very long and arduous journey for her. And so I just felt inspired by her also just telling the story, because it's very personal and very private for most people. So I thought that was great that she put that out there, and probably helped a lot of people. So I wrote this song the next morning with my husband called Always Be Your Girl, Mother to Son song. And I had heard that they were looking, but that they only had 4 slots on their album, and they were mostly going to do a record of covers, and that they hadn't found anything yet. They had listened to a few hundred songs. So I sent it to Sony, to her record label. I didn't hear back, and I thought if they listened, they would have gotten back to me quickly, either yes or no. And I said, all right, forget that. I'm just going to go directly to the manager, put the word out, got the email of her husband, and sent a cold email. And the next morning, I woke up and to an email from his assistant saying, Celine and Renee love the song. Can we call? So they called me within an hour. I couldn't believe it. It was absolutely insane. And you know, people who know Renee or know of Renee, he's a gentleman who's really, really nice and super smart. And he's a song guy. So I knew I could send him like just raw demos and he would just get them. And I know Celine really cares about the song and lyrics and stuff. So, and I have a sense of her life and what she's about. So he goes, yeah, we've listened to 300 or 400 songs and this is the only one that we found. We love it. We want it. What else do you have for us? So I sent them a second song that I wrote in 45 minutes. I did not think they were going to take this song, and they loved it. I think they even liked it more. It's called Thankful. And they both went on the album. So that gave me the pipeline, and that gave me the impetus to get pretty much any deal that I want, sign with any publisher that I wanted. So it was amazing. So got this bidding war going, ended up signing with Sony, an amazing team. I was so excited. And I know, how these things work. Like, you're on this roller coaster. It's going to happen. It's not going to happen. It was like, oh my God, and I made this whole thing happen. Like, it was so exciting. And it was all of the hard work and preparedness and luck and all the things that go into having a successful launch for something new. So I'm about to sign the deal, and I go to my friend's wedding in New Jersey, and I get a tick bite. And I don't know, because most people don't know. They're the size of a poppy seed. And I came back to New York City about 2 or 3 days later with a crushing head and neck ache. I didn't think anything of it, but I did think it was weird and intense. I am not a person that gets sick frequently, and I thought it was weird that in the middle of July, I got so sick. And a few days later, I saw a little bite and a rash around it. And growing up in New Jersey, I know this is Lyme. I walked to urgent care. They give me a few weeks of doxycycline, which is an antibiotic, and say, don't Google it. Don't be one of those crazy Lyme people. Don't look at the crazy Lyme people, of which I had never heard of. I thought that was a strange comment to make. And take this and you'll be fine. And but I just felt in my gut that this was bigger than a little flu-like illness that was going to go away. I had a sense of it, but I really didn't know anything. I didn't even Google it or anything. Went on my way, I got better, but everybody recovers from the flu-like illness of the initial tick bite. So did the doxy make me better? Would I have just gone better? But I just never felt right. I was very, very fatigued. And then a couple months later, I woke up and my breast was swollen and my arms wouldn't work. Literally, I couldn't lift a fork. I was so weak. I had done a workout and I got what people now know to be, very commonly associated with long COVID, which is called post-exertional malaise. It's exactly what it sounds like, where you just do too much or you do even not that much. And all of a sudden you get incredibly weak. And I was told I had rashes all over my chest and running down my arms. So I had these symptoms that you could see. And I was going to doctors and getting the impression that they thought it was from stress or that I was imagining it. And I'd be like, what about this rash that's going from the bite all the way down my arm, 3 months after the thing? Why is my breast swollen? Why do I have sudden sensitivity to light? Why am I getting night sweats? These are all, I always forget to mention that, but that was like a really scary symptom, because when you think about night sweats and you don't know anything about Lyme or Babesia or these other tick-borne infections, Bartonella, that are associated with night sweats very commonly, you think you have cancer. Here I am, swollen breast, my whole body's falling apart. I have onset of very severe anxiety, insomnia, OCD, depression. I kept having this intrusive kind of spiraling thinking about jumping out my window. I lived on the 8th floor. And I would constantly just ruminate about, I could just jump, but I didn't want to jump. It was really different than the way people think about probably, you know, oh, somebody is suicidal. I wasn't. I just couldn't stop thinking that. I didn't really want to do it. It was like an OCD thing that I never had before. So basically, you know, I saw 12 doctors during this period, and they kept passing me from specialist to specialist. And about Christmas time, I was staying at a friend's farm in California, just literally trying to rest and get better. Because at that point, I'd been told there was nothing wrong with my blood tests. So if you get basic blood tests and you're not looking for the right things, they are going to look normal a lot of the time, even if you're very, very sick. Something I did not know at that time. Went to California, rested for a week or something, but all of a sudden I'm there and I start not being able to breathe properly. So I have severe shortness of breath. So getting up from the bed to walk to the bathroom, I am literally having to hold onto the wall, hold onto the counters. I'm pretty sure I'm dying at that point. And I don't know what else it could be. And I just realized I'm probably going to die from something and nobody will ever know what it was because nobody knows what it is. While I was going to the doctors, I kept saying, I think it's from the tick bite. I think it's something about the tick bite. I didn't know about chronic Lyme. I didn't know about all the other infections, but I saw 3 infectious disease doctors in this process, and they certainly should have known. I saw internal medicine. They should have known. So highly, highly disturbing that when I would say that, what would come back is you were treated, and so you don't have an infection anymore. You know, you were given 3 weeks of doxy. But what they didn't tell me is that often fails. That's often not enough. And there was actually an unpublished study from Stony Brook Hospital, interesting that they never published it, where doxycycline had a 100% failure rate at the rash stage of Lyme, which is supposed to be very early. So it is early, but you can see it very quickly disseminates. I felt it disseminating. I felt it going to my brain. It felt it all, you know, my whole body reacting to it. So although you may not have a large burden of infection, pulsing through your body, a little bit is enough to create a hyperinflammatory immune response. So something was not resolved. You know, it was obvious that it was an ongoing infection and nobody would listen to me. Get back from California, friends of mine, I said, you know, I started to look into Lyme. Oh my God, there's about, 1 million reports of people on these message boards saying that they had the same kind of thing happen and it was a chronic Lyme infection. What is going on? The CDC website saying this is very rare for people to have ongoing symptoms, like 10%, and it gets better in a few months, but I'm getting worse within a few months. So I asked some friends for recommendations for specialists, people who treat tick-borne diseases, and thankfully a friend of mine knew about Dr. Phillips, Stephen Phillips, who saved my life. I was in heart failure, so the shortness of breath ended up being heart failure. And he treated me for Lyme and found that I had another infection spread by a tick called Bartonella. And when he treated both of these infections, all of my symptoms went away, including my neuropsych symptoms, including my suicidal ideation, including my fibromyalgia, and most importantly, my heart failure. So really made me question what really are all of these things and why are all of these things happening to so many people.
And it's a lot of people that this happens to consistently. Yeah. And what's interesting about it is, there are so few doctors that really understand the chronic aspect of this.
Yes.
So you have to go to seek out a specialist. And that's true for what, you went through as well. But just to paint that picture, how many doctors did you actually go to before you finally found the person who was able to help get you better?
12. But that's only 12 because I saw the bite and the rash. For the majority of people who get chronic Lyme or some other vector-borne disease or multiple vector-borne diseases, tick-borne diseases, they never see the bite. I think it's only 25%. There's early research that said only 25% or 30% ever see a bite and get a bullseye or see a bullseye or an EM rash, which is not even, most Lyme rashes don't even look like a bullseye. So there's all this stuff that's just totally in the public domain, often repeated by physicians and nurses, and it's all completely wrong.
Yeah.
So a dozen.
A dozen.
A dozen.
It could have easily been a lot more. Just like you said, if you actually weren't aware that you had a bullseye or had a bite, then you could have went to many different doctors trying to figure out what is wrong, but at least you had a clue that you might have had Lyme disease.
I did.
Now let's go back to just the Lyme disease diagnosis in general. So a lot of the doctors were telling you, don't go on the internet, don't go down these rabbit holes, you're going to be fine. And like as you mentioned already, millions of people have not been fine after being diagnosed with Lyme and have developed chronic Lyme. I mean, you see a lot more chronic Lyme cases pop up more and more every single day. Now, why are they telling you don't go on the internet? Don't worry about that stuff. You'll be fine in a few months, when that's not really the case typically.
I think there's probably multiple reasons. The politics of Lyme are more shocking than pretty much anything I've seen. I guess I could liken them most to what the public has seen with COVID. Very similar debacle. We don't have good tests. We don't have good treatments. We don't know why some people are fine after they get a COVID infection and why some people become so debilitated that they're bedridden or can't go to school anymore, or lose their vision, lose their hearing. I mean, I lose teeth falling out. The things that I've seen happen are just mind-blowing. But it's just a very political disease. They're both just very political diseases, and that is because, for example, with Lyme, what I can tell you, it's very well known and well documented since like the 80s or even prior. That Lyme can cause autoimmune diseases. What we think of is autoimmune diseases. They call it the great imitator. So when you think about what is autoimmune disease is really just your body's reaction to something that shouldn't be there, most likely. So an infection, mycotoxins, mold exposures, heavy metals, chemicals, can even be vaccines. People do get this immune dysregulation from these persistent assaults. And with Lyme, if it's chronic and it's causing all these symptoms, well, if you cure the infection with some cheap generic antibiotics, which was the case in my case and many, many cases, you don't need to put people on psych meds for the rest of their lives necessarily. You don't need to put people on immune suppressants. It's one of the the highest grossing drugs, multi-billion-dollar drug industries known to man. So it really does come down to money, and it does come down to a tremendous amount of influence that pharmaceutical companies have on medical schools. So it starts at the top, and it's in the teaching, and it's so pervasive, and it sounds cuckoo and conspiratorial, but it's actually true and really well documented, and we wrote a lot about it in our book with just a lot of evidence. When Lyme was first discovered, it was known to cause dementias, Parkinson's, fibromyalgia. It was known to have long latency periods like me, where you'd get the initial flu-like illness and a few months later you'd wake up and all hell broke loose. That was really well known and accepted. And then in the advent of them creating immune suppressants to suppress the symptoms that you can never get off of, that are actually pretty dangerous in many cases and can shorten your life, make you susceptible to other diseases and cancers and infections. It's just a whole web of medical dogma and corruption to untangle, to really get to the bottom of what's going on, if it's driven by one of these things that are now considered, outside the mainstream. But these are a really common infectious disease, and it's been so highly politicized to the point where there's just millions of people suffering with nothing, no answers. And you know that as well as I do.
Yeah. Yeah. As a matter of fact, as I first started learning about Lyme disease, the reason I started learning about Lyme disease is because, first off, I grew up in the Northeast as well. And Lyme disease is something that you are concerned with when you're growing up in the New Jersey, New York area.
Yep.
And as I started going into people's homes, I noticed something very remarkable. And that was the fact that I would sit down with certain families, trying to understand what they're dealing with in terms of air quality. And one thing that I came to understand was if you had Lyme plus, and I'll get to the plus in a second, if you had Lyme plus, you typically had a heightened sense of mold sensitivity, where essentially having mold remediation done in a very thorough way was what was necessary for somebody to actually feel good inside their home.
Yes.
And I was introduced to Lyme as Lyme plus because it was plus all these other potential co-infections that you had to be concerned with.
Right.
And as you mentioned, Lyme and Bartonella, right? That you experience. Some people it's Lyme and mono, and you get all these different co-infections that typically go alongside of Lyme disease, which really make it difficult to recover from. And now you're dealing with all these different things at once. The other thing that I came to learn and understand is that for whatever reason, probably the fact that mold can be an immune suppressant as well.
Yes.
You're taking, you have Lyme disease, which obviously suppresses your immune system. You have mold, which is suppressing your immune system. And you don't even have an immune system at that point.
Right.
It's already running on low battery here.
Yes.
And with that being said, was really interesting in my field was we had to come up with protocols and procedures to essentially eradicate mold, probably even better than hospital grade air quality for a lot of people, because they are dealing with so much at once. And so I took a very big interest in it early on in my career as I started learning, because, unfortunately, there's a lot of people that do have Lyme, and symptoms of mold exposure cross over to Lyme. Honestly, you could see people being misdiagnosed on both sides of the coin.
Oh, yeah.
And to make matters even worse, in a lot of the studies that I was doing at the time and talking to different doctors, they'd say, well, you could have Lyme and mold toxicity at the exact same time, and you'd have to treat the mold before you could even treat the Lyme in some of these cases. And so very, very interesting to see. And now that I know, of course, pretty much anyone with Lyme disease typically would contact me, and we would put together kind of a plan to help them, understand their environment, improve their environment, create that, really that better than hospital grade air quality. I say better than hospital grade because if you, Google hospitals and air quality, you'll find, people have died in hospitals because of poor air quality. So
yes.
I want to get to better than hospital grade air quality. Yeah, I mean, with hospitals too, I mean, there has to be a lot more. I love some of the products they're using, depending on the hospital, obviously. I love that they're all in on UV technology, but just that I've seen the research that I've seen and, going into people's homes and with UV lights in their HVAC systems and still seeing high levels of mold and bacteria, with those UV bulbs, you have to understand and wonder, what else can we do to make sure that we're protecting people that are inside hospitals. And typically the bigger concern is people with open wounds. You have open wounds and you have something like mold that can get inside the body through the wound like that. I mean, you're seeing all kinds of cases of aspergillosis and other fungal infections that are happening inside the hospitals themselves. It's definitely an area that we need to be concerned about just from the medical standpoint. And of course, that same concern should translate into our homes.
People don't understand how terrifying these fungal infections can be and how serious they can be. I think that it is largely unknown, and also just living in a home or working in an office with a high level of toxic mold. I think people don't appreciate the health effects. The things that I've seen and witnessed and gone through have been absolutely mind-blowing. I would say, frankly, more so than what I've seen with Lyme, just because, especially, of the lack of awareness. There's like this huge black hole in medicine around this topic, as you know. So it's like, where do you even start? You start telling people this stuff and they're like, what? You think that mom's Alzheimer's could be caused by mycotoxins, and yeah, I know it can. Read the study by Dale Bredesen, Inhalation Alzheimer's, right? Or is it something like along those lines? Yeah, there's a lot of research on it and nobody knows about it.
Well, you know what they say, you're crazy until they prove that you're right, right? So it's okay that we're in the crazy stage right now. The reality of it is there is so much evidence coming out, unfortunately, but also fortunately. I say this because it's unfortunate that air quality matters as much as it really does. We're fortunate enough that we know about it so we could do something about it. And I think that's the real key moving forward here is, unfortunately, air is something that we all need to survive. You can't go more than a few minutes without air. What's in that air is very important. And unfortunately for so many people, it's something that hasn't been on our radar for far too long. Now, I want to get back to your story here. So you start really recovering, which is obviously amazing. Mm-hmm. You then write a book, right, called Chronic, and I want to get into that. And at some point, you said very graciously earlier, thank you so much for all your kind words, that you ended up finding me, and obviously air quality becomes a bigger focal point for you. And so I would love to learn how that happened and why that is.
Yeah, well, you were either we've talked privately, but I have never talked publicly about this at all, not at all. So this would be the first time I'm telling this story. And even some of my friends don't know, because it was so incredibly traumatic and it was so incredibly devastating and horrific. So in 2020, my husband and I moved to California for a couple of years. And we were so excited because one of the places I always wanted to live, one of my best friends from college lives on the coast of San Diego in a town called Carlsbad. And I always loved that whole area. And there are these little beach towns. Anyway, so it took a while. We were staying at Airbnbs for 5 months or something. We found this great house near the beach in Encinitas that had just been gut renovated for the most part. And it looked beautiful, and we moved all our stuff from New York that was in storage. That was an incredibly expensive endeavor, but we thought we were going to be here for a while, and we were so happy there. And moved everything in, and I just didn't feel right. There were just things that were happening, and I thought, well, I wonder if I got another tick bite. I mean, didn't seem likely, but couldn't really figure out what was going on. And then I got really sick, and I started getting very severe and sudden. This just happened within a couple of months. At first it started again, a lot of rashes. The body only has some certain ways, a maximum amount of ways it can express itself. So it's you say rashes. Oh, well, you just said that with Lyme. That's true. But the skin is a big place where any kind of reaction manifests, right? Allergies, mold, things, this. So started getting rashes again, started getting very, very severe tinnitus, which is ear ringing. Never had that before. People do get that with Lyme and those kind of infections, and I did not. I had not any known case of COVID. So COVID is another big concern when you get tinnitus, but I didn't have that. As far as we know, no antibodies or anything. So could not really figure out what was wrong, but I was getting such severe cognitive issues that I wasn't able to drive. And at some point, I was walking down the street, and my husband texted me a photo of a burrito in the silverware drawer. I mean, with 3 question marks. That is the kind of stuff I was doing. Yeah. And I didn't even know I did it. Not only that, I had written something on the outside, truly, what the F happened to my brain. And I always had this sensation I was going to fall over. And it was just so I was going to pass out, and then it would just pass. And, weird, horrifying stuff. Definitely didn't feel definitely didn't feel I could drive or anything like that. Had this horrible sensation of crawling on my head and on my neck. had this biting sensation. So I've later learned about certain molds that have this, like, I think it's Catonium, maybe the one that has like this biting thing that comes along with it. I didn't know anything about that. So as I'm getting sicker and sicker and sicker and deteriorating really, really badly, really, really quickly, going to a lot of doctors, cannot find anything. All my East Coast doctors were trying really hard to help figure out what was going on because they have more experience in the vector-borne disease stuff. Couldn't find anything. My neighbor was a nurse, and she came over and she said, she saw that I had like this bright red rash that was like coming from my neck all the way down. I was wearing a t-shirt, like a tank top. You look very unwell. What is going on? I said, I don't know. Something's very, very wrong. I kept having the house inspected too for bugs, even though it was the cleanest house you've ever seen in your life. I kept having it inspected because you hear weird stories in San Diego about mites. Because as the local ecologist there put it to me, nothing ever dies here. So again, I'm thinking maybe the dog's bringing something in, like, and I can't see it. So we did everything. Okay, couldn't find anything. Neighbor comes over, says something is wrong. I feel like it's something wrong with this house. And what you don't know is that before you moved in, there was such bad water damage that the people who lived here before you fell through the balcony on the second floor into the first level of the house.
Wow.
None of this was disclosed to us. Okay, we had no idea that the damage was this severe before they had renovated. She brought another neighbor over who is a retired engineer, really nice guy, and he just went right up to the bedroom where I made my little office space and doing all my book tour kind of stuff because again we're 2022, I guess 2021, and he felt the wall. And he was like, this is 100% wet. This wall is soaking wet. You need to get out of this house now. And so does your husband. So does the dog. Nobody should be in this house. This is like very serious problem. Had an inspector come the next day, put a little keyhole, set up air testing equipment. And they found the most extreme levels of black mold, so Stachybotrys and Pen aspergillus and Catonium that he has ever seen in like 30 years in air samples.
Yeah.
He said he almost passed out when he cut the keyhole in the wall. And he's like, I don't even know how you were here for a couple of months. It was, he's like, oh, all my hair was falling out. It wasn't just, I was like a little dizzy and a little bit confused. It was way beyond that. It was way beyond that. And my ears were ringing. For anybody who has ever had tinnitus, it's a symptom like people do kill themselves over. It's agonizing. And mine was at a level 10. So if you were talking to me, I actually couldn't even hear over it sometimes. People would have to talk really loudly to talk to me. So I learned so much, and I learned a lot from you during this period, even though we didn't know each other yet. I immediately left. I moved into a friend's guest house. We all moved into my friend's guest house. Luckily, she was a mile down the road. We got rid of a lot of our items. It was devastating. But even if I wore a t-shirt that was from that house, even after it was washed, and again, I know people don't believe that these things are real. I will admit, I was one of those people before this happened to me. I really didn't. I thought it was overblown. And this is me coming from the Lyme world, getting treated like that. I really did have this bias against, mold illness because I assumed that it was an infection that people were missing. And probably in some cases it is, and probably in some cases it's both. But certainly mold is a poison. And I have a very close friend who's an infectious disease doctor who's from Harvard, who's super educated about mycotoxin exposure and poisoning. It's treated a lot of patients for this, a lot of PANS kits for this. And she was very instrumental in guiding me along with Dr. Phillips through this next part of my journey. And she said, these are true poisons. They can be used in biowarfare. People don't understand, sent me tons of studies and articles about it. It blew my mind. And basically the recommendation was get out, leave everything behind, start fresh. Maybe you'll be able to come back to your things in another time, but get rid of anything permeable. Just bought a new mattress, just sent one from New York, I can't even tell you the amount of loss. And then I was very ill for about a year. I mean, and nothing really helped except time and just literally being out of the house. But as I was saying, like even bringing a t-shirt or something from the house that I had worn or had in the house gave me a rash. Even after it was washed in borax and washed in, mold, there's a certain mold detergent people
Yeah,
use.
EC3.
EC3, nothing helped. So I put everything in storage for the most part, except, we did throw out a significant amount of things, even books, because certain molds like paper, like they eat cellulose. You know this, of
Yeah.
course, for your audience who may not know this. I love books, I love books. And I like real hard, I like to read a real book. And I had to get rid of a lot of things that I loved. And we moved back to New York.
A lot of people don't understand this whole getting rid of belongings thing, and I would love for the opportunity for you to maybe spell it out a little bit. I think you kind of did already, but essentially what happens is as you're around some of these things, you actually feel symptoms as if
Yeah.
you're being exposed to the mold all over again. Is that correct?
And not only that, so it's not, so I want to also, yes, but I want to delineate. I was sent to an allergist during this point. These are not allergies that I was experiencing. This is severe neurotoxicity. These are neurotoxins. So yes, for some people, they manifest in respiratory symptoms or infections. The other thing I didn't say here, which you do know as well, I had to have hand surgery because of this, because what happened was I had a tiny little freckle on my finger that was biopsied. It was nothing. It was like the size of a little pinprick, but because of the location, on the palms of your hands, if you have things like that, you kind of want to possibly get them biopsied and get them removed at least. So I did that. Well, that gave whatever was growing in the house, the bacteria that you talked about earlier that can co-grow, I guess, with molds. And it would be great to hear you clarify what some of those
Yes.
can be. I got a very serious infection from that little entry point in my hand, just from airborne, most likely, whatever was in the air. I got an infection called Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Right now, that is classified as antibiotic resistant. At the time, it was so resistant that I actually had to have emergency surgery at Scripps to have it removed because it created an abscess in my finger. Now, according to my friends who are doctors, and my friend who's an ID doctor, had a long career in HIV before she went into other areas of infectious diseases, said to have this happen to a non-immune compromised patient would just be so rare, would be so unusual. And I was immune compromised from living in mold. I was totally immune suppressed. It was insane. And then as the process went on, I met other people. I met an attorney who said she was representing a woman who had a double lung transplant from living in a house with aspergillus. And that was also in our house. And it was very lucky that we got out when we did, because I for sure would have died. There's no absolute, I also had severe cardiac symptoms from it. My blood pressure went up to, I always have like laughably low, my doctor always says like, you're like a stab victim. It's so low. My blood pressure was 180. And one of my doctors in California that was trying to help me from Scripps, she called my doctor, Steve Phillips, back on the East Coast, and said, I'm very worried about her. I don't really understand why this is happening. It could be from the mold, but she really needs now a cardiologist. And it was a nightmare. And I would say, to be honest with you, it was more of a nightmare than even going through Lyme, because at least I had a sense about what was wrong. And there was a whole breadth of doctors that I could see that treated Lyme once the world opened up to me. And I knew that. I found that out. Like there was like almost nothing, and I was fortunate because I did know of anybody that I know who those doctors are, and I have relationships with some of them, and they were very kind and willing to help me. But there's not a whole hell of a lot of things you can do when you get poison like that, except leave. You can take some binders, you can take cholestyramine, you can get a couple of things. But there's no standard that I'm aware of. It's sort of the Wild West. You just have to get out. You have to have your house remediated if you want to go back. I never set foot in the house again. I never want to. I frankly never going to set foot back in San Diego again, probably after what happened. But yeah, and interestingly, talking to a mold remediator there who was really great, he just gave me some friendly advice and said, I'm from New York, and I got here 3 years ago. And he said, in New York, you see the mold is in standard places where there's water, bathrooms, kitchens, under sinks, the roof leaking. San Diego, I have, especially within a mile of the beach where we were, he said, I have never seen anything like this in my life. There's mold all over people's bedrooms, all over their offices, in their kids' walls. He said, in the floors. He said, yeah, of course, these things can happen anywhere, but I've never seen anything like it. And again, it's just, you're always subject to the marine layer of the ocean and humidity there, and you don't feel it.
You also have in that area, I mean, just, from San Diego up to LA, you've got older homes, and everybody wants to keep this historic look.
Yeah.
And so you've got 100-year-old windows that, are rotting, especially being so close to the water.
It's true.
And people are like, well, I want to keep the architectural integrity of the house, so we're going to just kind of deal with it. And the amount of mold that ensues because you have so much moisture traveling through these windows that don't have modern flashing, that don't have, that aren't built quite the same way they are built here today. I mean, there's no insulated gas between the window panes and all these things, right? That actually are modern for a reason. They help create better, seals and weatherization, prevent weatherization as much more rapidly. So you get these problems developing in people's homes, and they're clueless to it until they get sick, and that's really one of the bigger issues that I deal with all the time. And as you mentioned, there's not a lot of information, standardizations, etc. I mean, just so you know, there are 50,000 companies that remediate houses in the United States. 50,000 companies.
Wow.
I will tell you factually that at best, 1% of them actually understand it from a health perspective. I mean, at best. All these big, massive companies, that are out there that do billions of dollars a year in business, that work for the insurance companies. I mean, they're just doing remediation from a cosmetic standpoint, not from a scientific standpoint.
That's right.
And that's one of the discoveries I made earlier on in my career in my 20s, working for my dad, realizing, oh my goodness, the standards don't even account for the science and how this impacts people's health. As a matter of fact, the IICRC just updated the S520, literally yesterday. I mean, we're talking, this update is monumental. It is the first time they're acknowledging mycotoxins.
Wow.
Okay. This has been 20 plus years in the making of people remediating houses to a level of, standards that didn't include all of the science. And so,
That's just incredible.
It is incredible.
We've known about this since biblical times, right?
Literally.
I mean, literally. It blows my mind. So now you see what happened in Lyme, which is only since the 70s. I mean, that we know about, the big outbreak. So Lyme existed before. Well, we don't need to get into it. But now you see, how long has it been from mycotoxin acknowledgement?
Well, they did better remediation in biblical times than they did over the past 20 years, and it's just now people are starting to understand, oh my goodness, there's a better way to do things.
Yeah.
There's too much reliance on chemicals. There's too much reliance on, make the way it looks. I mean, in some of the standards, you will see that, a visual inspection is all that's required by law. And I mean, how could you see something?
The visual inspection of our house, it wouldn't have fooled you probably, but it fooled everyone else.
Oh, I mean,
you could not. And also, I looked at old pictures of the house. She had painted over mold, and there's no way I could have seen it. I mean, there's no way I could have known. The crack was on the exterior of the house, and it was for 5 years. It was leaking water in the house, and she just plastered right over the interior Oh, she just replaced the drywall and didn't tell us.
I
mean, it was
have been
unbelievable.
in 400 square foot New York City apartments. I have been in 40,000 square foot homes. And I will tell you factually, relying on a visual inspection means absolutely nothing. And if I walked into Gwyneth Paltrow's home and just relied on a visual inspection, I would have found absolutely nothing, because when you look at it from that perspective, it looked beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful
and it doesn't always smell. That's the other thing. People
didn't smell.
constantly ask me, did it smell? No, it didn't smell. If it smelled, I would have known what the hell it was. Like, I'm very smell sensitive. If it smelled at all, I wouldn't have even taken the house. But if it smelled, it would have given me a clue. It smelled like fresh air. It was in San Diego. It was a beach house in San Diego. That's what it smelled like.
The way in which people thought about mold historically, I will tell you that it is so far from the truth. And I think that's what gets people caught up and put in this position where they can become ill from it. And it's because there's this misconception that it has to be smelly, or that you have to see mushrooms growing up the wall to live in a place that has poor air quality. And unfortunately, I mean, you can live in the most nicest, most modern place. Heck, it could have been finished being constructed yesterday.
Yes.
And you still might have air quality issues inside that home.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest misconception, is people are relying way too much on a visual inspection and poo-poo on the people that, like I said, there's 50,000 companies out there that, are doing mold work. Well, a lot of them still are doing visual inspections. A lot of them still are just taking an air sample from the center of the house and saying, all looks good here. And that's part of the issue. I mean,
Yeah.
we have so much advanced technology today. We have better testing parameters today that we can utilize to really look at homes. And that's what we need to be doing. And unfortunately, until that becomes the norm, you've got an industry that essentially is giving a lot of people misinformation, bad advice, and allowing people to get sick inside their own homes. And this is, of course, what I am against and what I stand for, to really help people and educate people to get the information they need to take back their health.
100%. And another thing that you just made me think about is how many people must say to you, how could this be mold? I'm the only one who's sick, or my wife is the only one who's sick and I feel fine, or my kids are sick, but both adults feel fine. This is so, at least for me, this is so common. Do you hear the same thing where people are incredulous because it's only one or two people?
Yeah, it's usually the other person.
Yeah.
The person who isn't sick. That's impossible because I feel fine. Well,
yeah.
First off, I want you to ask yourself, do you really feel fine?
Yes.
Because, what's interesting is a lot of the people that are skeptics in the beginning, when you talk to them after the fact,
Yes.
they'll tell you, I'll be honest, I was pretty skeptical, but I'll tell you, since you've, remediated and upgraded the air filtration systems and everything, I sleep better. I have more energy. I would have never guessed. I'm not as, I just thought I was getting older. I would have never guessed I could feel this way. I feel great. Thank you for that. And by the way, my wife, who I thought was crazy, she feels amazing now, and it was all worth it. I couldn't believe it. I hear that all the time.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate that with a new developing science, because it's really what it is. It's a new developing science. The importance that air quality has on human beings, unfortunately, is it sounds crazy because it is crazy. It sounds idiotic because it is idiotic.
Yeah.
We really are at the cutting edge of understanding homes and buildings, the air quality inside these homes and buildings, and the impacts on human beings. I mean, to quote somebody who I really like their work is Dr. Joseph G. Allen from Harvard, who says, the person who has an impact on the quality of air you're breathing inside a building has a more profound impact on human health than the doctor. And what he's trying to say is that air quality is so important to human health, and it's often not even discussed, let alone thought about.
Right.
It is having a massive negative impact on health. And unfortunately, doctors aren't caught up there yet.
No.
I mean, if you look at the American Medical Association, and all the literature that is taught to doctors in 8 years of education, air quality is not really mentioned. Environmental toxins are barely mentioned. And so, a lot of it is, as you alluded to earlier, it's in the education. Here are different symptoms that people experience. And by the way, these are the drugs that handle those symptoms. And if that's a major part of American medicine and the education that doctors go through, I'm not saying that doctors don't go through any human anatomy and all that stuff, but this is kind of the way it works. And if that's the way it works, well, then we are missing great opportunities to understand other root cause factors here that we just miss all the time in American medicine. And this is why a individual has to go to 12 plus doctors. I say 12 plus because believe me, I've spoken to people who've been to 40, 50 different doctors trying to figure out what's wrong with them, only to realize they had Lyme disease or they had mold that they were dealing with and they had no idea. And, the other issue that comes with all of this is because it's so new in terms of the modernization of understanding the impact air quality has, we don't have the support systems, right? So I've got to find a doctor that understands it. Yeah. I've got to explain it to my family because they might think I'm crazy. Yeah. And, I got to basically build a support system. I mean, with that being said, where do you typically turn to? You turn to people that have been impacted. You've turned to other like-minded individuals who have struggled their way through this. And, that's where we're at, is we have to struggle as a society to get better, which is crazy. And, I mentioned earlier, you can't go more than 3 minutes without air. Well, you take 20,000 breaths per day. You're inhaling hundreds of millions of particles. And we don't think that has an impact on us. I mean, it seems so obvious, but apparently the, common sense isn't so common, they say.
It's not. And you can't, because you can't see it. It's like you can't see these microscopic particles. So, mycotoxins, like viruses, you cannot see them in the air, but you can deeply inhale them into your lungs and into your body, and they can have profound health effects, even cause heart attacks. We know that mycotoxins are very, very inflammatory also, like we talked about with Lyme. So you can have this like multi-systemic inflammation and just feel horrible. And you still can't see it. Like there's not this really clear, you don't see the mushrooms on the wall. You don't see the black mold growing from the inside of the wall to the outside most of the time, I'm sure. I mean, you're the expert, but when I hear from people who have had mold problems, it's always hidden. It's almost always hidden. And it always took a long time to find out because you look for the most obvious things that doctors know about first. And then once those are ruled out, it's like, well, good luck. You must be crazy. We'll put you on some antidepressants and some anti-inflammatories and, call me in a month. There's just, you really just have to know. You really have to know some nuance about this stuff. And you have to go beyond a little surface Google search to find the real information. I recommend people go to Google Scholar or to PubMed and actually put things in like mycotoxin exposure, neuroinflammation and mycotoxins, and just start reading some studies, start looking at the data. Inhalation Alzheimer's, Dale Bredesen mentioned earlier. Look at some of this stuff and you're going to go, oh my God, this resonates, because even if it didn't happen to you, your family, your parents, you're going to see evidence of, oh my God, that leaky roof that never got fixed and both parents got dementia. Like maybe that was related. It's not, these aren't just normal aging processes. Something causes all of these things, and we have to find out why and protect ourselves from the manifestations of that by figuring it out before we get sick. That's the goal.
Before, exactly. And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to make people aware so they can prevent illness, not have to deal with it once they become ill. And hopefully we break through the barrier of that not so common sense to make it more common so we can achieve that. Now, you're kind of like me. Once you become aware of something, you can't just put it down. You've got to get the word out there. And so
Yeah.
you wrote a book called Chronic. I want
Yes.
you to tell us a little bit about that book, just in case anyone who's listening has not had the opportunity to read it yet. And, what inspired you to write it?
Yeah.
And then we're going to we're going to kind of segue into what are you doing now? How do people connect with you, et cetera?
Sure. So the craziest thing ever was getting the book deal, because I used to joke that like only crazy people write books, because who could actually figure out how to do that? Well, I started to write a column for the Huffington Post about Lyme after I got better. I promised myself that if I recovered, because I was so sick, that I would share whatever knowledge I had as far and wide as I could. And it never really occurred to me that it would be very significant. But even if I was like in the grocery store and I overheard a conversation, I would say, hey, I hear what you're saying over there. Maybe you want to consider Lyme, and like go on my day and hope I spread something important for somebody. But this ended up being very, very significant. I had no expectation. I wasn't trying to do anything except to help and share my information with a few people. And I ended up interviewing some celebrities with Lyme and some really great clinicians. And this, along with a bunch of other press that I was doing with my doctor, Stephen Phillips, during this period, caught the attention of an agent and some publishers. And so we were asked to write a book. It was the craziest thing ever to co-author a book together. And he and I are also, deeply aligned in the sort of travesty, of all of this. We would call them crimes against humanity. People deserve this information. They deserve to get help. They deserve to get better. And yet the truth is seriously being hidden from them in so many ways. And I definitely include mold and mycotoxin exposure under this really important and critical umbrella. So we wrote this book called Chronic, The Hidden Cause of the Autoimmune Pandemic and How to Get Healthy Again. And it is a totally science-backed book. It's published by HarperCollins. And we have hundreds of studies and hundreds of papers referenced in that book that talk about, and also we do write a little bit about mold. Not as much as I wish. We always joke now that he and I both have learned so much because of what happened to me. And obviously he has a lot of experience with this, with his Lyme patients, but he's held my hand the whole journey of all of this and read all the papers and did the deep dive. We always say, like, we would write a different book now. But we wrote so much about the underlying infections that cause chronic disease, autoimmune illness, and neurologic and neuropsychiatric diseases. And it is astounding how long this has been known, how much has been known, and how few people actually have been informed and educated about this. It's like really hiding in plain sight. So our goal was really, because especially me, because I'm more accessible than him, doctor in his office and stuff, one-on-one, yes, but as a patient, but the general public's not able to get access to him all the time. It was our way of saying, like, here is everything we got in this moment to help you go and find answers to help yourself. It was really a labor of love. And we just wanted to do right by patients. He also had a bad Lyme story that he shared for the first time in that book, and he was really disabled by Lyme Bartonella for a couple of years and had to close his practice, and had a remarkable recovery story himself. And even like as one of the top, brilliant Lyme doctors in the world, he couldn't even get answers from himself, for a while to start getting better. So we just both were really angry about the landscape and really tired of watching everybody suffer around us and being gaslighted and being told it's in your head. So that's how Chronic was made. And it's been so gratifying to be able to help people like this.
I agree, and I really appreciate the both of you for, putting yourselves out there, writing this book, getting the attention of the publisher and producing it through HarperCollins, which is, as an author myself, is no small feat. And, it's really exciting to be able to cross over and bring this mainstream, which, thank you so much for doing that, because it was very needed, and is very needed. And I'm sure you surprise yourself all the time by seeing the book continue to sell, because it's such an evergreen topic, unfortunately, because unfortunately we do get Lyme disease pretty frequently in certain regions of the U.S. And it is something that still is, it's better than it's ever been in terms of diagnosing and treatment options, but it's still kind of a very Wild West topic.
It is.
Just like mold is. And so thank you for that.
100%. Thank you. I agree with you. And also, forgot to mention that the book was supposed to be put out at the end of it's like mid 2020, and then COVID hit the world. So the publisher delayed the printing and the publishing date so that we could write a chapter about COVID. And it is actually amazing to go back and look at that chapter, which we wrote at the very end of 2020. We just predicted everything that was going to happen, because it was the same thing as Lyme, medically and politically, the same players, the same cover-ups, the same debacles. All of it was the same. And so it's kind of traumatizing, reliving this whole thing again. But at least we're going in with our eyes open, and we are still continuing to tell people, you don't listen to what people say. Look at the data. Look at the evidence yourself. Don't listen to people who say don't do your own research. Like, that's a whole weird political thing now. Doing my own research saved my life and saved a lot of people's lives. And I'm sure most of the people that come to you because they did their own research and they figured out, I need to talk to you and get you over here and help me get better.
Yeah, I mean, it's an unfortunate endeavor, because there's so few people that understand this. Again, from a health perspective, how do you identify it properly? How do you fix it properly? Like, it's actually an art to me.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and until it becomes a little more mainstream, and you have people that are looking to develop this art and become better and better at it, you literally are dealing with like 1% of the population of those companies that actually know how to do it. I don't want to sit here and pretend that if you don't hire me, you're up shit's creek. There are some good people out there. It's just that they're so far and few between. You have to find the right person. You have to build a relationship with them. You have to trust them, obviously, to take care of your house the way your doctor would take care of you, in their care. And this is really what it takes. It's a very, very much so a scientific process. It's a step-by-step process. It's a journey. It could be full of ups and downs and frustration, because you're looking at lab data and translating that lab data into a scope of work in a construction-like manner that happens inside your home. And so, you're a lot of it is waiting on post-testing and verifying and making sure that what you did is working, and having skilled people, a skilled team really around you that can execute that flawlessly from start to finish. It's a lot of ups and downs, but it's important. And I think, I developed this company to do that, because I knew how important it was and how few and far between it was, and being able to grow something nationally to help people was a dream of mine, and I can't believe it still today, but it's incredible. A dream that I was able to make come true.
It's amazing what you've done.
It was like 2022, we officially were like fully nationwide, and
that's
so
incredible.
Really cool to see. All right, so Dana, what are you doing now? How do people get in touch with you?
Yeah. Well, I have been hosting a podcast called Tictective for the Bay Area Lyme Foundation, which has been an incredible pleasure and joy for me. I get to talk to all kinds of brilliant scientists and people like you. In fact, your podcast is coming out really soon. That was really fun. And I get to interview people about very hot topics like mold and latest COVID research, and about rapamycin and longevity. I got to interview Matt Caberline. So all these people that I really admire, I get to talk to and have on the podcast. So that's been really fun. And if people want to connect with me, they can find me at Dana Parish on Twitter at Dana Parish, Parish. I don't really use Instagram that much, but I think that's going to have to change. That's the Dana Parish. Thechronicbook.com is our book website, and our book Facebook page, I think, is at Lyme Book. I think that's what it is. If not, it's like the chronic book. You could probably pretty easily find it at this point. And there's so much more work to be done. And I think, you and I we'll have a long working relationship together, continuing to help people like this,
Yes.
because they need it. And, I love what you're doing. And I really am appreciative of everything you're doing. And you have a new PCR that I'm going to be able to start recommending now that I've learned all about it. It's very exciting. And
Yes.
I can't wait to get mine, because I'm going to be moving soon. I'm going to be doing that before I move. I'm going to be testing my environment. I'm not doing what I did in
Please
California
do.
ever again. Yeah, we need to talk about that too.
Yes. I will happily send you one. I am so grateful to have made acquaintance with you originally, have become friends with you. Our teams are talking about some exciting things for us to work on together to help more and more people, which is very, very exciting. To have two passionate people aligned to improve people's health on subjects, unfortunately, so few people know about, is crucial, because, I'll tell you, it was like 2013. I'm in my mid 20s at the time, and I sit down and I'm like, am I really on the forefront of finding something out? Like, because there's just no research about this stuff. And it turns out that, like, actually the answer was pretty much yes. Very
Yes.
few people out there. And I don't know if the same thought ever crossed your mind as you went through this journey, but it is remarkable to really see that, the way in which we understand certain things, not everything is figured out,
I think what's so interesting for me to learn, and the reason I'm doing this, and I think I speak for you too, there's so much misinformation. And you and I can watch a 20-minute interview with somebody who's a subject matter, expert on one of these topics. And because you know it so deeply, you know that 4 things that they said are totally incorrect. They mean well. They're not trying to mislead anybody, but they may be really important and critical pieces of information. For example, I'll watch like a great talk on mold, right? And somebody will say, and you can just spray a little bleach there and it'll get rid of it. Well, I learned from you, that's actually not the way to get rid of mold on grout even,
Right.
That is a small thing for, that just goes by in a little talk, but that's a really important thing to know. Like, you actually need to use peroxide, and you actually need to use a more high grade peroxide. Like these are small incremental things that make a huge difference. And that's what happens to me constantly. So I want to be always a source of accurate information. If I don't know something, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to mislead. The worst thing for me would be to do harm to another person. So, and I know you and I must both feel like that. Like, we go, oh no, how did that get said? How did that get by the fact checkers? This is all wrong. So, we need to just be the source of truth, no matter what dogma it goes against.
Yeah, we need to hire those politician fact checkers. They do a great job telling us that the politicians had lied to us. We need to hire those guys to fact check for air quality. That would be fantastic.
Yes.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, a lot of stuff gets said and lost in translation, and misinformation starts to develop. And, if you learn nothing through this episode, please learn that you should never use bleach on mold ever again.
Exactly. And don't live on the coast of San Diego unless you have a very thorough mold inspection.
Dana, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy and valuable day to be here with us, sharing your story, helping educate others on the importance of the quality of air, as well as Lyme disease and how important it is to, really be aware of Lyme disease, that certain illnesses that you may be experiencing could be Lyme disease, and often doctors are not diagnosing this properly. And so, thank you for really helping to bring that awareness around and hopefully helping people in the process.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.